Hello. Hello. Well, cool. Product market fit. It's one of those very ubiquitous, pretty jargony phrases. Can mean many different things to different people. April, how would you define it?
Oh gosh, good morning. Get straight into it. I'm really excited to be here today. I have gotten to work on a bunch of products over the years, including Twitter and Slack from pretty early days. And I think the sign of product market fit is when you start to feel like your hair is on fire and you cannot keep up with the volume of customers that want to use your product or the demands they are placing on you and your product team to build the capabilities they need because they like what they see and they're getting so much value out of it that they actually they want more. And so that sense of really being pulled into expanding your product, expanding the types of customers it can serve, or like those are the signals that I remember from the early days at Twitter and Slack that really stood out to know that there was that, not only do we already have product market fit, but we were actually going to have product market fit for an audience and an opportunity that was way bigger than what I may even.
Amazing. Spenser, with Amplitude, what were some of the earliest signs that you were onto something that people wanted?
We spent about a year and a half building with completely no product market fit. I mean, we were having to beg companies to try out our analytics product. We're like, hey, can you just send us data, put the SDK in? And what flipped for us is all of a sudden we started to get pulled by companies who were asking us, hey, can you guys build this? If you guys build this, if you guys build this, if you guys have this capability, we'll use you guys. And so all of a sudden, instead of having to ask people to use us, we were struggling to keep up with, similar to what April said, the set of requests that people were coming in on. And we ended up growing from 0 to $1 million in ARR in 9 months in 2014. And yeah, that was the start of Amplitude.
Amazing. Tamar, you and April actually both worked at Slack.
We did.
But you just missed each other. You took over for April's position.
That's right.
At the time that you joined, it was like 1,500 employees. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like finding features that land for a more mature company, and what are the unique challenges of that?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to actually meet April during the process and joined as a chief product officer in about 2019. And as April said, there was product market fit for Slack. It was on fire. Everything was breaking because we were going so fast and customers had so many demands. But then as you progress, you get different customers. And so you start with one set of customers with one size company. And then as you get bigger, you get different demands. And actually, product market fit does not come for free just because you had it in the early days. You might have product market fit for an SMB of 100 people, but do you have it for an enterprise of 10,000 people? Well, you started with engineers, and then you're moving to salespeople and to marketing people. Do you still have the right product market fit? So product market fit isn't something that you gain and then you have it. It's something that you have to keep on investing in. And also, as you may have different product lines, as April was the one who started the platform, and then it really grew over the years. So that was another thing. You have to look at how do you incubate new initiatives and grow them all. But I really agree with both Spenser and April. It's about the pull versus the push. That is the core.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I remember pretty early on, I think in my first year at Slack, is we had interest from a very large breakout ride-sharing company here in San Francisco that wanted to use our product. And they wanted to use our product for something like 20,000 users. I don't remember the exact number, but it was on the order. It was a 5-figure number of 20,000 or so employees. And we just simply couldn't do that. We had to just actually say no. And I remember Stuart Butterfield, the CEO and founder, he actually had the wisdom to say, we can't say yes and do this halfway because the cost of selling this product and having it used in a way that is awful for this company, for their employees, it is just like a terrible experience is like, that's going to cost us way more than not getting this one contract. And so, you fast forward to the era when Tamar was there, we had by then we'd built the support for larger companies. We actually had them as a customer. We had a bunch of enterprise customers at that point and supported organizations up to 100,000 employees. During the time I was there, we had to build a ton in order to do that. But we also then had competition. And if you go back to 2015, there were other chat services that were available, but there was nothing that quite filled that need of Slack. And that really changed as more competition came on the market.
Totally.
And you had to do the work to continue to win in a market that was much more competitive than where we began.
Like today's AI market. Yes.
Yes, exactly, like today's AI market.
April, it's so funny. We had the exact same story at Amplitude, where in the early days of building the product, it was all about having a more sophisticated report or a more advanced feature. So you'd build out like a retention cohorting product or part of the funnels feature, and they wanted some particular segmentation on it. And I remember the first time it changed for us in the enterprise. We were talking to IBM actually. And that was very different from talking to smaller companies that were fast moving. And I remember talking to our buyer at IBM, and I asked him, hey, what's the most valuable feature in Amplitude? What do you like using the most? And I expected him to say some sort of report, like some sort of advanced dashboard that we have, like most of our customers did. But what he instead said was shareable links. And I was like, shareable links, that's the most important feature in our product? And that was kind of a revelation for us at the time, because it was like, okay, the needs and requirements of a larger enterprise customer are very, very different. And that started us on our trajectory of going up market and finding fit for companies with much larger teams and helping them understand, okay, hey, the collaboration aspect of this product is just as important to these guys.
Yeah, Tamar, something that we've chatted about was the role of data in finding product market fit. Have there been any surprising data sources that have been really valuable in finding features and products that work?
Your users. So the biggest thing, so data is something you always have to be looking at. You have to make sure that everything is instrumented in the right ways, but you also can't over-index on it, because sometimes you get lost in the data, and you see maybe the high-level aggregates, or you see how people are going through the funnel, but you miss some of the specifics. So what we used to say at Slack was be data informed, but not data driven, that you don't want to just react based on the data. You have to have an intuition, and you have to talk to your customers a lot. Early user studies, going and talking to the customers. One thing I very strongly believe in is that people from R&D should be talking to customers. Yes. They should be in the meeting with the customers, because you have that sense much more strongly that if it's filtered through like the go-to-market team, especially in the beginning, because sometimes an engineer will go on a customer call and they can fix something in an hour that might go through all of the levels of indirection before it gets to somebody who can fix it. So I think the biggest signal outside of making sure you understand your data is that user studies and talking to your customers.
When I was working on Twitter ads back in 2012, 2013, 2014, when I would go meet with advertisers, you go in to tell them about these new targeting capabilities that you're building, all these new whistles and bells you're adding to reports and that sort of stuff. And I'll never forget meeting with a big brand advertiser and waiting for the questions they would have about all these product capabilities that we were about to launch. And their question was ultimately most of the time so what should we tweet? And you're like, oh wow! We have a completely different problem here. They actually understand how to use ad platforms because they do Google or other things like that. What they don't know how to do is how to show up in this, how to show up in this space and how to express themselves as a brand, because that was all pretty new to sort of have a brand express itself more like a human on a daily basis and have interesting and novel things to say. And so that ultimately that feedback was a huge wake-up call that we just had so much more work to do around bringing our brand advertisers and really like large creators, media companies, et cetera, along in the process of understanding what Twitter was for and how to show up in this space. And I think me being in the room was hugely valuable, but both at Twitter and Slack, I've been really fortunate to work with extremely strong research teams that do qualitative research that make it so that a PM can't be or even a founder can't be in every single customer call. And so as you scale to be a larger organization, using methodologies like qualitative research studies is a huge way to bring more of the texture and like the real understanding of the questions behind the questions, the problem behind the problem, which is where you can actually find sometimes a much bigger problem space to work in and build a big company. So we did that at Slack and at Twitter with amazing teams of talented folks. And now as an investor, there's a company I backed called Outset that's making it possible to do that kind of qualitative research without needing to have dozens of researchers on the team, being able to use generative AI to similarly unearth those insights that are much deeper that data, frankly, are not going to tell you.
One of the actually most surprising things to me is that how many teams where the product development team just doesn't talk to customers directly, and that's something that we are very, very deliberate on at Amplitude. You can often find really surprising things. One of the coolest stories I've come across in terms of understanding your customers with data was actually in talking with the team at DoorDash, and they were 5 or 6 years ago locked in this head-to-head competition with Uber Eats about who's going to own food delivery in the United States and who's going to create the best product. And at the time, the Uber Eats team was very focused on deliveries in 30 minutes or less. They thought that was kind of the key metric that their users found the most valuable. But in looking at the data, DoorDash actually found something very different that was more important. Actually, do you guys remember this? Do you guys remember what it was?
No.
So they found that customers were actually okay with deliveries taking longer than 30 minutes, and all the way up to 42 minutes, but they wanted the delivery estimate to be accurate. So the food delivery had to be on time. And that allowed them to understand their customers much better because they allowed them to say, okay, hey, we can offer you a much wider range of options by extending that delivery distance, but we have to hone in operationally to make sure that deliveries are on time. We'll incentivize drivers. We'll put a lot into the efforts into making sure the delivery estimate is accurate. And that was, frankly, the single biggest insight that helped them catapult to first place in the US food delivery market over Uber Eats and all of the competition. And that came from looking at that data and understanding that the on-time delivery was the most important feature of their application.
Who hasn't played a game of chicken with a DoorDash delivery and had it arrive first? So embarrassing.
You guys have all touched on AI a little bit as we're talking about kind of going through your data and finding useful insights. I'm curious if you guys have used AI in any interesting ways or, just new ways to help you sort through your data and help you find product market fit.
Well, considering that I work at an AI company building AI products, I'll start with that answer.
Yeah.
So if people don't know what Glean is a work AI platform where think of having ChatGPT, but on the knowledge of your enterprise. So we ingest the content from your enterprise, all of your SaaS tools, and we enable you to ask questions about it. We're also a platform, and you can build apps on top of the content of your organization. So when I first got to Glean, I joined it in March. At first, you're like not used to it. And as April said, you get this box, and what can I actually do with this box? And people in the consumer world who are playing around with ChatGPT, but you see the retention numbers are not always as high because they're not quite sure what to do. So I got to Glean, and I had a question about one of our accounts, and I asked our head of sales, and he's like, Tamar, just Glean it. And I was like, I felt so stupid. And so then now I've like gotten into that habit of course, you go to Glean first to ask questions, and I use Glean like 10 times a day. But what we've realized is, to your question about AI, a lot of these AI products, people, they're not hitting the mark yet, and you see that in the numbers. I was talking to a PM on a AI product that will remain nameless, associated with a large enterprise, and they were telling me that they're just finding it hard for people to actually use it and engage because they don't know what to do. So we put a lot of effort into that cold start problem, exactly like the Twitter, exactly like Google. If you think about it, when Google started, nobody knew what a query was. Nobody knew how to formulate a query, and now it's like secondhand for everyone. Well, how do you know what to start with that the AI can do? So now we have the ability to create prompts and save them and surface them. So if you're using a prompt, and then people in your team will see that you're using that prompt and then surface it for you so that you have an idea how it can help you in your daily life and the power of what it can do. Because I think a lot of this is behavior change in getting people, one, the products need to be good enough, which I think many of them have not found product market fit yet. But the ones even that have, you have to figure out how to enable that.
But by the way, Glean makes so much sense as a use case in terms of AI because it's like you're searching and you're asking it to summarize the existing data you have, which is kind of perfect. Being an analytics company, we get to see a lot of these AI companies, and frankly, particularly in B2B, the retention rate for these products is for a lot of these products is terrible. And that is exactly because of what you said, where they're just bolting on AI chatbot on top of a point and click interface and not really thinking about, okay, is this tool appropriate for this use case? And so I've seen so many demos and a lot of things that are way overhyped because it's just the companies haven't really thought through, okay, is this tool appropriate for this use case? Is it going to be better at searching or summarizing or creating than using a point and click interface? And a lot of times the answer for a lot of products I see is no. Which is why we see a lot of these AI products have quite poor retention.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we're in this interesting moment because every company, whether you're 0 to 1, or whether you're literally -1, you're a founder thinking about starting a company today, all the way up to the largest enterprises, of course, AI is top of mind for you, and it's probably like the main thing you talk about in any sort of public sphere. So there's so much noise out there, and there's like these giants that are sort of fighting each other in a public sphere. But I would say we're still at the visionary stage for a lot of this, the vision stage for a lot of these things. And I get to spend my day these days as a venture capitalist. I started a VC firm last year that invests in pre-seed to Series A companies called Adverb. And so I spend most of my days actually using products that most of you haven't seen yet. Or a very select few might have started to dabble in these products. And I would just say that we haven't yet seen the way that mainstream users are going to get the full value of generative AI yet. And I'm going to put my money, and I am quite literally every day, on early stage teams that are just getting started, being able to start to chip away at what's possible with these capabilities, because I don't think that a simple chatbot is going to be the way that we interact with these and harness their capability. I think things like Cove AI that came out a couple of weeks ago that we were lucky to invest in that give you a bigger surface area for how you can capitalize on generative AI and ask a broad question and have it unpack that question into the many sub-questions and tasks that are actually necessary to complete a complex task. I'm super excited about that product. There's another product called Particle that is a news app, and I listen to basically a personalized feed of summarized news on my commute back and forth that is generated entirely via AI. And these are the things where I'm like, okay, I can start to see what the future looks like, but it's not what's necessarily being talked about in the ether right now because frankly, I just think the world has not yet seen the things that are really going to show us the future.
Yeah, as an investor, I feel like you have an interesting insight into product market fit. Is there any particular company that lost their way and then found it again that maybe you helped guide or watch their journey?
Oh gosh. I'm not sure about that in particular, but I would say Twitter is an interesting story because I think for those of us that use Twitter, very intensely relied on it for information, relied on it for building our network and our community, used it quite literally to contact people via DM. I mean, I've talked to journalists who are like, I don't know where to find my sources anymore, like they're gone. For those of us that use that product really intensely, I will say nobody could ever explain what Twitter was. And if you worked at Twitter in 2014 and you asked 10 people what it was, you would get 10 different answers.
You're writing about your breakfast.
Yeah, exactly, a bran muffin. So Twitter was a product that sort of had product market fit in spite of the fact that no one knew exactly what it was for, but they knew they needed it. And so I think that, for me, that serves as a reminder that, that some of the biggest breakout products are sort of successful in spite of themselves in certain ways, and then other products are super successful because there's total clarity, there's clarity about the problem you're solving, you're right that it's a problem, and you execute on it really well. And I think Slack is sort of more of an example in that category.
Yeah, I mean, with product market fit, I feel like part of the success is also knowing when something's not working. Spenser, can you talk me through maybe a feature you changed or sunset when you realized aspects of it weren't landing with users? And like, talk me through that decision-making process.
Oh, so many. In the early days of Amplitude, we ended up building all sorts of stuff just try to find something that people would use. And so in addition to analytics, we built out crash reporting. We built out kind of a white labeled analytics for the service called Corona, with the idea that we'd give away the analytics and then people would somehow decide they wanted to spend money with us. But that didn't end up working out. And so we actually had to try 4 or 5 different things for the first year and a half of Amplitude before we figured out, hey, what people want is in-depth understanding of their users and just a view into what it is their users are doing in their products and different ways to dissect that with data. And it took us a good year and a half to get that clarity and to kind of shut down all those other pieces before landing on that. And then once we did, it was kind of like you're on this big accelerant where you're just like, all right, let me find more companies who want that. And then once you find more companies who want it, you can build even more stuff, which attracts even more companies, and you're kind of on this virtuous feedback loop where you're just doing the same thing again and again. One of the hardest things, actually, I'm sure you guys have experienced this, is when you start to get large and you have a lot of surface area, there's always, no matter how obscure the feature in your product, there's always some number of companies using it. And so it's actually really hard to like turn off a feature. We're like trying to sunset this one feature that is like in product recommendations because it's too complicated for our companies to use, but we still have 7 customers on it out of our thousands, and they're paying us, and so we have to come up with this year-long plan to get rid of it. And that it's a hard thing when you get to scale.
Totally. I think there is a difference between consumer and enterprise companies. Consumer companies are notorious for just like, we tried this,
get rid of it,
turn it off, but it's still painful. Like when you're at Google and you sunset a feature because nobody's using it, you might have 1 million people using it. Yeah. And so it's wild, the number of like hate messages you get, but it's still like clearly not worth it. And I know Google gets a lot of flack for that, but on enterprise, you have to be much more cautious. And I think on the flip side, you have to be really cautious about launching new things that you're not sure about. To have design partners, have betas for features, you have to think about product market fit, not just for the company, but for the feature. When we launched Glean apps, so Glean apps is a no-code way of building apps on top of the corpus of your enterprise, we did it very deliberately and slowly of working with design partners. What do they need? How do we get to product market fit for this feature? Because to your point, people start building on it, and you're an enterprise, you got to support it.
Yeah.
Because they're counting on it for their business, and if you're not, you have to have an off-ramp that's a gentle off-ramp, that's a migration. You can't just pull it. But you can if you haven't committed to it yet, if you're like testing it out and you have your beta partners and you've been very explicit.
Have you guys sunset? I'm curious. Have you guys had to go through that at Glean where you've sunset anything?
At Glean, we haven't, unless it happened before I joined. So before I joined, there was a lot of throwing things at the wall as well, and we've got like a lot of knowledge-based stuff. We do have features that not a lot of people are using, but they're not a high price tag to keep going.
Yeah,
so we haven't sunsetted them.
It's the curse of B2B. Like, you're just adding complexity as you grow.
At Slack, we definitely did.
Yeah.
At Slack, we had features that we sunset, or we then kind of hid behind like lots of clicks. But there were things that were just hard to maintain, like Slack calls. We had Slack calls, and then we migrated to huddles, but it was like a 2-year process. Mm-hmm. Slack calls was like, there were some people who were really relying on it, but it didn't work very well. Mm-hmm. And the technology base was not very good, and we knew we had to do something different. And we launched Huddles, and Huddles was the fastest growing feature ever. From the minute we launched it, it like skyrocketed. But we still had to be careful of transitioning people, and it took a while to, but we did eventually sunset it.
Is there anything that you wish you'd known about product market fit when you were first starting out that now you're like, oh, it's so obvious?
The biggest thing on my end is you should always be spending half your time talking to customers. So I'm an engineer. By the way, just quick question for the audience. How many folks here are engineers? Okay, half the room. This is my favorite stage,
amount,
by the
yeah.
way, builder stage. This is great. You guys are awesome. We're talking about building products here. So it's very, it was very, very natural for me as an engineer and my co-founders as engineers to always want to solve a problem that we saw. Hey, we know this customer, wants this particular report, or we know this customer wants this SDK. And what we weren't doing during that time is talking to lots more customers who had a lot more pain. And so one of the things I wish I had done in the early days of Amplitude is spend half of my time talking to customers. I probably only spent 20% of it. I was thinking, hey, I'm kind of embarrassed about this product I have. I don't really want to show it to more people before I've built it out more. But that was entirely the wrong mindset. What I should have instead thought was, hey, I actually want to learn about what is very valuable about this analytics product that we're building and how I could better understand that problem. And the key part on that is that never stops. And so, back to my earlier example on DoorDash, like even once you're scaled and big, it's really easy to misunderstand what it is your customers want, right? Like the entire delivery business thought people wanted fast deliveries. As it turns out, they want accurate, they want on-time deliveries. And might sound similar, but it's actually a subtle difference. And so that process of understanding your customer never stops. And I think the biggest regrets I've had while building Amplitude have been the times where I haven't spent enough time on that.
Yeah, I think when you're building 0 to 1, like goal number 1 is to get your product in the hands of some real target users as quickly as possible, because that's the only way you're actually going to know. But why would anybody try your brand new product? Well, probably because they have some connection to you personally. Your early customers are going to be other other companies that are in the same accelerator batch as you, or other founders that are at a similar stage, or people you worked with in the past that are willing to take a bet on you. Or maybe you can incentivize some customers by having them, be advisors, or like you can figure out some way for them to have some skin in the game. But there's going to be a reason that they're willing to take that bet on you, which also means what they tell you may not line up with the data. They may tell you, this is awesome. I can't wait to use it more. When are you going to have A, B, and C? You're doing great. And so you can sometimes get false positives in terms of the sort of qualitative, just sort of like anecdotal feedback you get from customers. And we have a founder that we've backed that we recently sort of saw build this product, and frankly, I liked the product a lot. I was using it, but even though a lot of people said this is great, he had the fortitude to look at the data and say, yeah, but you're not using it that much. You're using it maybe once a week. That's not often enough to be able to, and to really hold the line. And this is where I think data married with real customer feedback is extra valuable. Sometimes you need to use one to validate or gut check the other, and that's one of the things I think a lot of early stage founders don't realize is that they can't, there's one source or the other that they actually can't trust on its own.
That is such a good one, that people will tell you what you want to hear, and you have to suss it out.
I've seen a lot of founders fall into that trap. It's painful, because then they realize later, oh gosh, people have just been being nice.
They are.
But I've killed myself, and they're being nice. Yeah.
One of my favorite things we came across in the early days of Amplitude was this meditation app named Calm.
Oh, yes.
And they wanted to look at the data to understand what people really valued in the application. And they originally thought it was going to be something like, hey, you did a meditation for a certain amount of time, or it was a certain type of meditation, or you used a certain guided experience. But what they actually found was they had this small group of incredibly sticky users, and that were 3 times higher, the long-term retention, And the reason they were 3 times higher is because they had actually used this feature that was buried deep in the app. So you had to like go to settings and then click it, and it was only like 2 or 3% of the customer base that used it. And the feature was, it was setting a daily reminder to meditate. And that was the key thing. And one of their engineers had just kind of built it on the lark saying, hey, I heard one of the users I talked to wanted a daily reminder. What they then realized was that a core part of their product market fit was actually not guiding you through a meditation. It was actually helping you build the healthy habit. And that's why a lot of users were actually downloading their product. And so they redid their entire sign-up flow. So instead of putting you straight into a meditation, it instead asks you a bunch of questions about the habit you want to set up.
Right.
And they went from like a few % of their customer base setting a daily reminder to half of it overnight, and their retention skyrocketed, and they ended up being the top app in the App Store and Apple's App of the Year in 2018. And it was all because they, to your point, had looked at the data and they understood that a core part of their value was not just guiding people through a meditation, it was actually helping them build a healthy habit.
Yep.
So how do you, I don't know, it's interesting hearing you guys talk about like kind of testimonials versus data. Is there ever a time when the testimonials, you should have gone with that instead of just sticking to the data, and that having feature that your users say they really love, even if they're maybe not using it enough, can be really valuable? It's a great question.
I would say it's definitely, and sometimes the other way around.
Okay.
If you get the anecdote of this isn't really that useful, but the data shows it is, I think the problem is actually, and the Spenser can probably talk to better than me, sometimes the data is wrong. Sometimes you're not looking at the data with the right lens or slicing it the right way or looking at averages and not looking at like, so an example from a while ago when I was at Google and I was doing international search, and it's like, oh, well, latency isn't a problem because our P90s are totally fine, and we were working on our Google search app in India, and so we kind of like just dismissed that because the data said it was fine. But we'd get these reports. People would go to India and be like, no, this is actually a real problem. And we weren't slicing the data in a granular enough way. And once we sliced it in the right way, it's like, oh, wow, there's like a huge problem here. So you hear the anecdotes, and you have to listen to them, and they are more powerful, especially when something isn't working. Like I would hear at Slack anecdotes of like, some people couldn't log in, and then but the data's fine, everybody can log in. But then we'd still get these reports of there's some cases. And you just like need to drill in and learn and not just ignore that. Jeff Bezos was famous for when he would hear something, he would forward an email and put a question mark on it when there was like anything wrong in the product.
That was the whole email, to be clear, just a question mark, right?
The whole email. There'd be a customer email, a customer's interaction, he would forward it and you'd like dread the question mark emails. But they were all this. It was like all anecdotes like that you can't ignore when something is going wrong.
Well, one of my favorite stories, I can't remember where I've read this one, but it was the YouTube team wanted to decrease the page load time and make it load faster, particularly for people in developing countries that didn't have fast internet. And so they had set the metric to be, okay, well, what's the average or median page load time? And they did all this work to get the initial, like all the Chrome load down from 2 megabytes to 500 kilobytes. But the page load time didn't move at all. It was still like the same, it was like 3 or 4 seconds on average. But what actually happened was they had like twice the amount of usage because so many more people were using it, which is fantastic. And so it just goes to show that you absolutely have to understand the data in context. And I think we are so early in understanding. We have this superpower for the first time where you can look at people who are using your product. It's incredible. Like, that's never happened before in the history of product development. And so we're just scratching the surface of I think, where that has the potential to help us understand our customers.
Yeah, and I'm super excited when I can ask my BI tool, tell me all the data that I should know, give me the insights that I'm missing, and that the AI is right now good enough if we direct it in the right way to be able to give us these insights. We're just not using it to the fullest potential right now.
Yeah, is there a specific example that comes to mind of something that the AI brought up for you?
Well, I'm saying any of this, once the BI tools get good enough,
Yeah.
we need to be able to ask them in natural language, not just give me a report of X, but analyze all the data, figure out what the outliers are, and then tell me which customers are being successful and which aren't, what segment I should be worried about. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to do that today. So if you're building a tool like that, let me know. I would love to try it.
We're working hard on it, so
Cool.
we'd love for you guys to try it out.
Anybody
Dog.
on the stage
It's,
is
it is,
building that
to your
tool.
point, it's early because there's obviously
work
huge breakthroughs in AI and text as well as image generation, but for data, it's really,
It's really early. We've looked at a bunch, and it's super early, but it will get there.
When?
That's the ultimate
I
question.
know.
I think we'll see some interesting stuff next year. I think we'll probably see some big stuff in the data space in 2025. So that's my bet.
Cool.
Are there any tools in particular you have your eye on?
But besides ourselves at Amplitude, Tableau's done some very interesting things. Snowflake's done some very interesting things on this. Databricks obviously has done some very interesting things, but it's so early. It's so early. I think one of the traps I see a lot of companies in is they're just like, hey, here's a set of data, just analyze it. And that misses how much context you need for each specific type of data set. Like product data is different than transactional data, is different than financial data, is different than log data. It's like there's context that, I think there are going to be applications built around each one of those.
Yeah.
I mean, I think whichever product helps software teams actually identify the most important metric for them to track,
Yes.
like that is a business I'd like to back because you think about how much work goes into in larger teams, like which metrics to use for your OKRs and what should people be gold on and all that. So it's all sort of a proxy for not actually understanding the earliest, most strongest indicator of success, whatever success means, revenue, retention, expansion, et cetera. The earliest indicator of that, because that's the thing you can track and try to drive every single day and drive through your product roadmap and drive through your sales and go-to-market teams. In a lot of companies really struggle to get that right, or there's even contention within the team. There's one group that thinks it's this, there's another group that thinks it's that. I've seen all versions of that, and I think that's where I hope these BI tools go, which is not just to help you be able to use a natural language for a query, but actually help you ask the right questions in the first place, so that you can get to an answer that can guide everything downstream in terms of how you run your business.
Yeah.
So if you're working on it, come talk to April afterwards. She'll invest in you. Come talk
Or
to me if you want to be acquired.
he'll acquire you.
So got the whole group up here.
Or Tamar
Or-
will too. Yeah, she'll take you as well. So great.
We've got time for one more question. Aside from companies that you've worked at or you are currently at, what is a company you think has the best product market fit right now? Spenser, you go first.
Oh man, putting me on the spot.
Yeah, it's tough.
You want to go first?
I can go first.
All right.
Oh, great.
I mean,
Amazing.
Ooh,
You go
saving
first.
us, appreciate it.
ChatGPT, nobody's ever gotten so many customers so fast
fast,
ever in
yeah.
the history of
Elephant in the
software.
room.
Yeah, that one's the obvious one to me.
Yeah.
So I took the obvious one, so you guys need to think about the harder ones.
Yeah, you can't repeat now.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I think
Suvla.
Really?
Suvla in San Francisco. Really good product market
Fantastic
fit.
food.
I'm just going to go completely out of software because I don't have visibility on all the numbers for these growth companies. But I will say, I love food, and I love when I have team members or folks come out, everybody has to go there. They have really nailed product market fit. And if you don't know what Suvla is, then there are about 10 locations, and I encourage you to find one on your trip here.
great Greek food.
Great
It's
pivot.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
One of the ones actually that's been really impressive to me is HubSpot. One of the things they did very, very well is, so the story, if you look at the story of B2B, it's basically all the large businesses are built in the enterprise. So they go up market and, you kind of Salesforce, Adobe, Workday, ServiceNow, you kind of go down the list of the largest SaaS companies in the last decade, and it's all, hey, we decided to go enterprise. HubSpot's been incredibly impressive to show that you can build a very large business, multi-billion-dollar business on the basis of serving the SMB market really well. And I think it goes to show how big software markets are today, and how if you're very laser focused on the right niche and you're willing to say no to some other things that may be considered conventional wisdom, you can do incredibly well. I've been very impressed by what they've done over there.
Great. Can I throw one last software in?
Oh my
just
God,
to
do
say
it.
my reputation as a serious technologist. And by serious technology, what I'm going to say is astrology apps. What a hack.
Yeah.
It's a daily use case straight out of the gate. I don't know how much, what the usage is for some of those apps, but seriously, I remember a pretty luminary Gen Z / millennial cusp founder showing me CoStar many years ago, and I was like, oh, that's nice. I'm probably not going to invest in the astrology space, but that's nice. I will just say that and some of the other like breakout apps, like they have got to be killer businesses that never need venture capital ever again, and I salute them for it. So.
Amazing. We love astrology here. And that's what we're going to end
See, I
on.
told you. Thank you, Margot.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Yeah, that's all we got. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.